Gay News Radio itself does not officially endorse a candidate, but I support Blue. I'm with her. But whenever I bring up Hillary Clinton in private conversations, especially at work, where I work with 99% women, it goes historically bad for me because I have not taken into account these extremely high unfavorables, and I get thrown all type of vitriol about how she let a rapist go when she was an attorney, and there's an audio recording about her laughing about getting a rapist off in 1982, and then all the video clips that show her flip-flopping on gay marriage. So the thing that I think is interesting is that people pull sound bites. People pull these different sound bites and haven't looked at the big picture, whereas I've seen kind of a 25-year long run of this former First Lady, former Secretary. I'm older, I'm experienced, that's why I'm with her, but it's interesting to me how some voters that are the Bernie or bust that just absolutely hate Hillary Clinton, let's just say it for what it is, they hate her and they swear they would never vote for her. I think they're younger, I think they're millennials, and they aren't experienced with what Hillary Clinton represents in the longevity of her career, in the big picture.
Well, I mean, I think they also don't realize that you mentioned her flip-flopping on gay marriage. It's fine. If somebody wants to pull up a quote from Hillary being anti-gay marriage one year, and then they pull up another quote or clip of her 2 years later being completely for gay marriage. It took me 12 months, not even 12 months. It took me about 5 or 6 in that span to really fully turn things around in my mind. If my perspective could shift and change so quickly, and go from being a Bible-banging homophobe to being an ally and hardcore marriage equality supporter, I don't find it very difficult that she might listen to her constituents and that she might have a similar experience. Now, I don't ever believe she was against it. I think she was pandering to her fellow politicians and for the media, saying what she felt she had to say at that moment. And I'm sorry, but you can't get in politics and not have to deal with that to an extent. Everything is very controlled. Everything is very contrived. It is very much like reality TV, though thankfully not quite. So
her
flip-flopping on gay marriage is not a big thing. Anybody who holds that against her needs to rethink it.
No, I just want to remind our listeners that even President Obama himself, again, who is about to finish out a historic term, bringing about, historic changes to the LGBT community, everything from the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell to gay service members, and now same-sex marriage is coming up on a 1-year anniversary. He evolved on the issue, and he credited his own daughters, Sasha and Malia, White House staff, friends, and everyone that came to him and helped him evolve and sort of come to the light, that come to Jesus moment. So the President of the United States evolved on this issue. We can give it to Hillary. She's allowed to evolve on the issue. Anyone is allowed to evolve on this issue.
Oh, yeah. No, and that's the thing. We've got to make allowances for people to change and adapt and not to hold who they were against them. I think that's moving forward. That's the best thing. I listened to Hillary's acceptance speech when she won California. Was it New Jersey she was speaking in? But my wife was sitting there with me where, she was crying. Like, it's just the same way that President Obama winning was a historical situation, Hillary winning is another historical situation. And you can't discount that. As much as the election is not about what genitalia the candidate has, it is a big deal. It is a big moment, and I think it's a good thing for women, and I think that those things hurting her will turn around. I just think Bernie supporters need to keep building on the momentum that they've created, but not alienate other people in the process. I feel like they very much could end up being like the new, a leftist version of the Tea Party, which originally was supposed to be a credible, conservative, intelligent conversation happening amongst a bunch of people, and ended up becoming, the Sarah Palin and Ted Cruz hour. So,
well, we need to have a convention moment. So if you remember in 2008, when Hillary went to the convention, endorsed candidate Barack Obama, and there was huge cheers, and he became the candidate. So Hillary Clinton then was taken into the Obama administration as Secretary of State, and now 8 years later, you've got the president returning the favor. He's officially endorsed Hillary Clinton. I have no doubt that between now and November, you're going to see active campaigning on the trail from President Obama for Hillary Clinton. So that's what Bernie Sanders folks need, is there needs to be that convention moment where Bernie Sanders rings the bell and says, I endorse candidate Clinton, and you probably need him to actually be out on the trail. People are going to need more than a CNN moment. They're going to need to see Bernie Sanders out there with her on the campaign trail saying the bigger goal is to defeat Donald Trump. That's what it's really going to take.
And losing is a bitter pill to swallow. And, I don't know Bernie Sanders personally. I believe him to be a very, generous, wise, gracious kind of man. But I do believe that he's, like I said earlier, he's taking one too many curtain calls, and he needs to send a very clear signal to his people that he knows he's done that, in order to not undermine and pervert the legacy he's built, with his little bird in Portland. So
at this point, we don't, based on all the intel that we have at GNR, at this point, we do not expect him to go in and pull any dirty tricks or try and flip delegates.
I don't think he would do that.
All of the dissent that you're hearing on the Republican side, where you've got 1,000 people, including 250 delegates, getting on conference calls trying to find out ways to unbind delegates to vote against Donald Trump. You're not going to see Bernie Sanders go in and create that type of a revolt. He understands that she won this thing by a landslide. There's no math supporting his case at this point.
And I appreciate him, and I appreciate what he's done and the conversations that he started and the way he's motivated people. I just hope that, see, the difference between Bernie and Trump is that Trump right away went after channeling people's hate and people's rage or people's ignorance, like we were talking about earlier. He used very controversial issues and very controversial statements to rally the loud people together. And Bernie created his narrative around, hey, listen, things aren't good right now, but you can change that. He empowered them. He tried to encourage them to see things for what they were, to take the mask off, so to speak. But when he went from speaking out against superdelegates to saying that now he wants to go get the superdelegates to work for him, and he started turning people against the DNC and really trying to contest things that he couldn't, and keep in mind this is my opinion, I feel like he then accidentally kind of swerved into the same lane as Donald Trump and began creating this my person or no person, my way or the highway kind of mentality. And that's not how anything changes in this country. You have to work with people across the aisle. You have to practice intentional empathy. You have to be able to coexist with people that are different from you. It's just a basic part of life. And if you don't get that, your life is not going to be very good or very easy. It's only going to be more difficult as a result. So I think Sanders, his narrative was kind of taken over by some of the people in his campaign, and I think they kind of started perverting that narrative, and I hope it doesn't ultimately cause us to look back and remember him in the same way that we remember Trump running and speaking out against the quote-unquote establishment.
Yes. So, Tim, speaking of looking back, so we're just days away from the historic one-year anniversary of the Supreme Court's decision in Obergefell v. Hodges. Of course, we've had Jim on the show this week reading passages from Loveland and kind of telling us part of how the story got all the way to the Supreme Court and we won this fight. In the last year, though, we've seen a lot of challenges, unfortunately some expected as backlash in terms of anti-transgender bathroom bills and sort of a state-by-state level. Has anything that you've seen in terms of outright assault on the LGBT community and the transgender community specifically since the Supreme Court decision surprise you? Does it anger you? What's your take on the current, measures and countermeasures, sort of the chess game that's still in play as far as our rights in this country?
Well, it all angers me, and I think the biggest thing that I have to remember every time I turn on the news or allow myself to read the news headlines online is that something there is going to piss me off, and they're doing that for a reason. And the outrageous statements are there, and they're trying to sell ad space by using headlines that are, blown out of proportion and stuff. I've seen a lot of stuff, and it angers me. But what I have to remember first before I respond is that you're never going to belittle somebody into agreeing with you. You're never going to change somebody's mind by beating them in an argument or a debate. And I think that our approach has to be very peaceful. We need to look back to, the tenets of nonviolence that Martin Luther King practiced. We have to really get back into a mindset of activism, and we need to get off our butts. I think millennials, I love them, and I'm trying to do everything I can to help encourage my fellow millennials, but man, they piss me off. I mean, I've never seen a more self-entitled, lazy group of people in my life than my fellow millennials, and I think that we have all this passion and we have all this knowledge at our fingertips, and then we just think that by posting something on Facebook, something is going to change. But like, nobody ever came to Christ because they saw a bumper sticker that condemned them. Nobody ever, saw that Jesus fish and had a, crazy road to Damascus experience. The thing that changes people is being loved and realizing that they are loved. And so, I've seen a lot of stuff, but I think it's always been about as much as I've, as what I've seen lately. There's always been the vocal minority that is constantly trying to fight against and take us back out of progress, into the past.
Yeah, we've, as a community, had a tremendous amount of media coverage, unfortunately, as a result of the events in Orlando. But the point being that when I've looked at the news coverage and social media over the last, 10-plus days since the attack at the Pulse nightclub, I've seen everything from vigils in the United States, right there in Knoxville, Tennessee. Your Mayor Barry held an event here in Portland, Oregon. And then around the world, Paris, France, monuments been lit up in rainbow colors. I'm sure you know what I'm speaking of, TV story after TV story about all these amazing vigils. So I'm wondering if it takes a tragedy like the Pulse nightclub shooting in Orlando to sort of be our modern-day Stonewall to help reunite the community and bring it back into focus. Do you think that there can be some positives within the LGBT community that come out of a tragedy like Orlando?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when people are attacked, especially in what, experience I do have around the LGBT community as an ally, I've never been around people that are more willing to, jump on a grenade for a brother or a sister. People who are willing to help you in a time of need. Like I always said, if I found the level of authentic community in a church, the way that I did, in a gay bar, in the average gay bar I go into, I would be at church every Sunday. There's when people are persecuted, they band together. They put a lot of their differences aside. They practice intentional empathy. They take care of each other, and I know that from my own experience. When people were introduced to me or first getting to know me while I was in my experiment in my year, all of them kept asking me the same question: "Are you okay? How's your family taking it? Is there anything we can do for you?" And I finally got the nerve to ask somebody one time why people kept asking me that, and they said, because, we want to make sure that we are there for you if you really need it. And, better to ask you a question and get on your nerves than have, hear through friends and acquaintances that you've killed yourself because you have been